Hello, my name is Kevin Kane, and today we will be discussing my general lesson plan for a flipped classroom. I will be teaching this lesson to a 5th grade science class of about 25 students at a local elementary school. The lesson topic is interdependent relationships in ecosystems, which is a stepping stone of basic scientific study. The basic purpose and the general focus of this lesson is to educate students about the relationships between different organisms in an ecosystem and demonstrate the responsibility of each organism, no matter how big or small. As many classrooms have their own challenges, I have planned ahead for students who require extra assistance. Some students may be learning English as a second language. Therefore, they will need to be introduced to the new vocabulary at the beginning of the lesson. I have also prepared for students who may struggle with reading, who have different styles of learning, and for those students who lack basic prior knowledge of the subject. The two objectives of this lesson are for students to be able to list different interactions between organisms, and for students to be able to use deductive reasoning to determine what would happen if one particular organism was removed from the ecosystem, and the impact that would have in different parts of the world. I've listed the standards that I've followed in developing this lesson plan. As far as the language demands, I've listed key vocabulary words, as there is a new level of vocabulary being introduced in this new area of studies. I've also listed some common misconceptions about this lesson. One misconception is that humans have no part in an ecosystem. This is very false. I intend to make this very clear at the end of my lesson during the open discussion period. I've carefully listed out the procedures that I will follow in conducting my lesson. First, the subject will be introduced to the students using an extreme scenario in which they will be asked to think about what would happen if a small organism, such as a bee, was removed from the world. This is done to pique the interest of the students, to give a real-world example of how it could affect their daily lives. I plan to take 20 minutes to discuss this. Secondly, students will be given visual aids and worksheets or online which show the cycle of death, decomposition, plant growth, and ingestion of plants to get a better understanding of the relationships between organisms. Often visual aids can help students who struggle in other areas. Next, students will be asked about the importance of sunlight and the role that it plays in different ecosystems. Students will then break into groups and must choose one organism to remove from an ecosystem and then work together to figure out the impact that it might have. This group activity should take about 30 minutes, as I want them to truly think it through. Next, there will be an open discussion period to allow for any and all questions and further explanation of specific key points that may have been misunderstood. At this point in the discussion, we will introduce the impact that humans have on our environments and different environments around the world. Students will then be asked to complete a 3 to 5 paragraph response for homework, explaining the roles that humans play in our ecosystem. In this essay, they will be able to reference the positive and negative impacts that the human beings have on their surroundings that we have discussed in class at the end of the lesson. This essay will be used as the assessment of knowledge upon completion of the lesson to ensure each student obtained all the information needed to continue on. In creating this lesson plan, I referenced the theory of anchored instruction. Anchored instruction involves the use of an anchor material or media, usually a video, to create a shared experience among learners at the beginning of the lesson. The media in which I intend to anchor the students with will be embedded inside the Prezi and is to be watched at home the night before the lesson. This homework is key in a flipped classroom, as students are able to develop a list of questions of things that they do not completely understand that they can then bring in the next day, and I can further explain during the lesson. An extension of my lesson, if time permits, the students will be able to break into groups and create their own ecosystem. This will help to better assess their understanding of the lesson and to also pique interest in the topic. They will need to list the roles of each organism and why this role is essential. I've listed the sources that I referenced, where I found the student learning standards posted by me. Next, we will take a quick look at the Prezi I have developed, which the students will be asked to view at home the night before the lesson. Because we are low on time, I will only show the key points and I will not spend too much time while flipping through. First, I provide a basic definition of what an ecosystem is. Then, I move on to describe the different interactions between living and non-living organisms in an ecosystem. First, the relationship between living and non-living, how sunlight produces energy in plants. Here I use visual aids to show that animals need water. And then I introduce bees, will be touched on further in this explanation. Here I give a small visual representation of the transfer of energy from sunlight to producer to the primary consumer, who is consumed by the secondary consumer, and how tertiary consumers leave behind waste, which is then decomposed to restart the cycle. Here we go step by step to show how sunlight provides energy to plants, the producers, how primary consumers gain their energy from those plants in their leaves, and how secondary consumers gain their energy by eating the primary consumer. Decomposition plays a big role in this cycle. Decomposers, such as fungi, break down remains and wastes from other organisms. Different types of decomposers are shown here: worms, fungi, and bacteria, using visual aids to pique the interest further of the students. Here I introduce the extreme scenario that was introduced in the beginning of the lesson, or will be introduced at the beginning of the lesson. How bees being removed from an ecosystem can impact our daily lives. Without pollination, flowers would begin to wilt. A lack of oxygen could pose a threat to small organisms. Over time, death, small scale, and could lead to large scale. This will be further discussed in the lesson. Lastly, I provided an instructional video found on YouTube about food chains. And I've also provided my flipped classroom screencast, which was assigned for this assignment. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for watching.